This is Duke University.
Tonight's guest, Richard Rodriguez, has occupied a very special place in American letters since the publication of his first book, Hunger of Memory, The Education of Richard Rodriguez, in 1982. Since then, he has gone on to write 3 more outstanding works, including Days of Obligation, An Argument with My Mexican Father, in 1992, which was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize, Brown, The Last Discovery of America, in 2002, and most recently, Darling, A Spiritual Autobiography, 2013. Rodriguez has had a long and distinguished career documenting public life in America, and his works engage urgent and ongoing conversations around the topics of class, ethnicity, race, religion, and sexuality. Rodriguez's writing yearns for a connection to the public, to the reader, and to a broader sense of community, furthering an essayistic tradition taken up by figures such as George Orwell, James Baldwin, and Octavio Paz in the 20th century. It is in this context that his writing resonates most forcefully as a reaction against the partition of the social, the widening chasm between economic classes, and the spiritual deficit that has taken hold over the last 40 years. Rodriguez's narrative voice is sensitive and thoughtful, yet iconoclastic. Hunger of Memory opens with the following words. Once upon a time, I was a socially disadvantaged child. 30 years later, I write this book as a middle-class American man, assimilated. End quote. Rodriguez's moving autobiography traces his intellectual maturation from a boy growing up in Sacramento, only possessing a few dozen words in English, to a PhD candidate and Fulbright Scholar of Renaissance literature. Hunger of Memory, as is perhaps now widely known, forcefully argues against the post-civil rights policy prescriptions of affirmative action and bilingual education. Wading into the cultural politics of the moment, Rodriguez resists the label of minority student, arguing that affirmative action will do little to ameliorate the poverty of African Americans and Hispanics, and instead have the unintended, or perhaps intended, consequence of producing a new crop of elites with little connection to the social and economic conditions that define everyday life for the poorest among us. Aztec ruins hold no special interest for me, he writes. I do not search Mexican graveyards for ties to unnamed ancestors. I assume I retain certain features of gesture and mood derived from buried lives. I also speak Spanish today and read Garcia Lorca and Garcia Marquez at my leisure. But what consolation can that fact bring against the knowledge that my mother and father have never heard of Garcia Lorca and Garcia Marquez, end quote. Toward the end of Hunger of Memory, he implicates the reader directly, lamenting the impossible gulf between those who benefit from affirmative action and those who will continue to remain excluded from colleges and universities. Quote, you who read this act of contrition should know that by writing it, I seek a kind of forgiveness, not yours. The forgiveness, rather, of those many persons whose absence from higher education permitted me to be classified as a minority student. I wish they would read this. I doubt they ever will, end quote. Attention to place and community, precisely at the spaces where the public and private come together, has been a consistent theme in Rodriguez's work. Earlier this month, every public school teacher in West Virginia went on strike, demanding better pay for what is, as we all know, more than just the labor of teaching math, science, history, or English. Teachers in Oklahoma are now threatening to do the same. Public institutions, schools, libraries, parks, community centers are vital resources. In an age where our sense of what is public is rapidly vanishing, his words remind us that this is something worth defending and preserving. Please join me in welcoming Richard Rodriguez.
Thank you very much. That was so thorough a review of my life that I think I don't need to say anything. I can leave with thanks and goodbye, and I will see you in a few years. I do have another apology to offer. I was raised by Irish nuns. I have particular affection and interest in the Irish in America, not least because of one of the arguments in the 19th century against the Irish coming to America was Mexico. And the argument was that if you allow the Irish as Catholics into the Protestant state, they would unite during the Mexican-American War and join Mexico and to overthrow the Protestant state. I always thought that was a good argument, except for it didn't account for Pat Buchanan. And it didn't really, the story of what takes place in the 19th century with the Irish didn't either account for this other history of American immigration, the Irish immigration. There was a man named Jack Ryan who joins Mexican troops in fighting Americans and who led a band of Irishmen, young Irishmen. And they were finally apprehended, most of them, and they were hung in the Zocalo of Mexico City. I don't know why I'm weeping at Jack Ryan. I am at that age, that tiresome old age, where everything is wonderful to me and everything is marvelously sad. Anyway, Irish nuns, they would remind me, since they were as much as responsible as anyone for getting me here, that I should begin with an apology. And that is simply that for years at events like this, I have asked my audiences if they ever go to Barnes & Noble or a suburban mall bookstore where the books of the world are divided into these odd categories like New Age religion and Latino studies, which is where I end up. Would they please move me someplace else? Bill Moyers, that wonderful Baptist minister, which is what he's ordained Baptist minister, in his first interview with me, when we were both much younger, said, let me see if I can get this straight. He said, do you think of yourself as Hispanic or do you think of yourself as American? He said. And I said, Mr. Moyers, I think of myself as Chinese. Truly, I do. I live in San Francisco, a Chinese city, and I am becoming Chinese. One night at the University of Arizona, I was giving a reading at, I think, 6 o'clock. And there was going to be a lesbian poet reading at 8 o'clock. And I had my Mexican-American audience. They came, postponing their burritos for the evening. And they were listening and appreciative, except for this young man over there, a beautiful young man who was unhappy. I don't know why beautiful young men are unhappy, but trust me, they're unhappy. And in the middle of my reading, he had to make a point of his unhappiness, like this. Then he got up, and he walked up the aisle, and we all sort of followed him with our eyes. And the door opened up in the auditorium to the lobby. And here were all these lesbians in the lobby waiting for the 8 o'clock reading. And I thought, why can't I get the lesbians? What is this rule that the lesbians have to come listen to the lesbian and the Mexican Americans have to come listen to the Mexican Americans? If any lesbians are here today, I thank you for coming, particularly if you are not Mexican American. Latinx, it sounds like a laxative. I guess what I've come to realize is that the real drama or the possibility of Latino, Latina, Latinx, Hispanic is that we might be engaged without knowing it in trying to describe America's relationship to the Americas. My own preference is for the word Hispanic because I think in settling upon an English word to describe my relationship to the largely Spanish-speaking hemisphere, I come to what is the tension that belongs to the Latino, Latina, Latinx, Hispanic, and that is that we are dealing with the collision or marriage or mixture or meeting of cultures. And in that negotiation, which is happening all around us, I saw it today when I came for a sound check in midday, and I saw a grammar school group of maybe 50 young kids from a predominantly black grammar school who were sitting with very brown Central American looking kids. And I thought, there it is in Durham, North Carolina. It's going to be happening from that meeting. And we are witnesses to something that hasn't happened yet. It is like Jorge Luis Borges writing a fiction about the future as though it has happened in the past. Anyway, happy birthday. It is the Latinx's 10th anniversary. One of the requests of the organizers was that I identify or try to describe several intellectual, cultural influences of Latinos, Latinas, Hispanics, Latinxes on the United States, and I've decided on 3. And just to prove to you that I'm not at war with the Spanish language, the language of the conquistador, the bastard, I will announce these 3 categories, also to keep you awake, so you know how long the sermon will go on. I'll announce them in Spanish. So, número 1. I call this the knowledge of calloused feet, the knowledge that has been brought in on calloused feet to the United States, and that is that the United States is el norte, and that it is not, as we have so often described ourselves, an east-west country, but we are now on a trajectory with the South, and that we are not bounded by a sea to shining sea, but more interestingly by the desert and tundra, between hot and cold, between Canada and Argentina, is this new reality of the United States as el norte. For years and years, I've gone around quoting Carlos Fuentes, the Mexican novelist, who said once a wonderful line. Listen to this. He said that the Mason-Dixon line is the border between the United States and Latin America. And I heard that and I thought that was so wonderful. The Mason-Dixon line is, I'm standing in Mexico right now, here. The Mason-Dixon line is the border between the United States and Mexico. I've been everywhere in the world repeating that line from Carlos Fuentes. William Faulkner once said that, Garcia Marquez once said that William Faulkner was a magical realist. At least that. Anyway, I had to write this piece and I had to quote that line from Carlos Fuentes. And I looked it up on Google. Why did he write that? And Google said that I invented the line. It's getting to be that way. It's going to be worse. Número 2. Mixture. I doubt that anyone reads Newsweek magazine. I don't even think Newsweek magazine exists. I haven't been to my dentist for a few months. And anyway, I read People magazine because I want to know about Angelina Jolie. Is the marriage going to be salvaged? Why do you laugh? This is serious business. Anyway, I wrote an essay on Newsweek magazine when Barack Obama was elected, and I said, at last, America has its first brown president. Well, the lady on NPR, I did that same little gig on NPR. This is when I stopped listening to NPR. The morning of his election, I was sitting in a hotel bed in Houston. It's amazing what you can do on the radio. You can just be interviewed without any clothes in a hotel bed in Houston, talking about the brownness of Barack Obama, the marriage of Kansas, and no one suspects what you're doing in the bed. They think that you're in some mythical studio somewhere in Waco. Anyway, I said the marriage of Kenya and Kansas had at last bewildered Jim Crow. That everything the black American was not allowed under Jim Crow. The possibility of mixture was now triumphantly defeated with the election of Barack Obama. Well, I was wrong. he quickly became our first black president, and so he is. If that's what the public needed, that's what the public needed. But we lost in that process, I think, a chance to talk about mixture, about how our lives are mixed, erotically mixed, how we are more than one, how we are often in our blood, the blood of the antagonist as well as the seducer. I meant no disrespect, I mean it now, none now. But there is in this dialectic no redemption for us to erotically challenge the force of the tragic force of hatred with the possibility of eroticism. We don't know how to do it in the black and white dialectic. Número tres. Cultura. What unites us as Latinos, Latinas, Latinx, Hispanics, is this notion of culture, not blood. There is no brown blood. There's mixed blood, which we have in buckets, but there's no brown blood. There's white blood and black blood, but no brown. Or if you mix black and white, you get gray. There's no gray blood. At Christmas dinner, when I look around and I see my nieces and nephews, my beautiful nieces and nephews, they all look like Keanu Reeves, even the girls. And usually after the gravy starts getting cold, I launch into one of my completely unexpected stories that is of no interest to anyone but me. I named, well, there was the night I was on the Merv Griffin show. And I was on the Merv, do you know what the Merv Griffin show? No. I was on the Merv Griffin show with Orson Welles. He was doing magic tricks. He was enormous that night. And he was wonderful to me about my first book. He said, I'm glad you wrote that book. He said, just having it described. Afterwards, my publicist said, give him the book, because Merv Griffin didn't want the book. He hadn't even read it. So one of the producers gave it to me. In the parking lot, I gave it to Orson Welles. In the time between our taping, which was about 4, and the taping that was going to follow us at 6, there had been a barrier set up. It was like Nathaniel West. These hundreds of people with autograph books waiting for Joan Collins. Joan Collins, ladies and gentlemen, is going to come in a few minutes. Get your autograph. Do you have a pen? Do you have a pencil? Do you have paper? And I think John Forsythe was coming with her. But here was Orson Welles. Ladies and gentlemen, there's Orson. Orson, to walk forward, he had to walk sideways. He was so big by that time. How do I tell a man late in his life, 3 years away from his death, when you were their age, Orson, you were something. When you were married to Dolores Del Rio, the Mexican actress, you were something. That man in Citizen Kane, wow. There's this guy over here with an autograph book. He's waving it, he's calling out to us. And I think to myself, what does he want? I'm not Joan Collins. I said, do you want Orson Welles? He said, no, the Mexican. So I thought I was being served with a subpoena or something. Many of the stories I have in LA, there could be subpoenas still waiting for me. I went over and he handed me a piece of paper and a pen. He wanted my autograph. And I thought, are you crazy? There goes Orson Welles. And he was walking toward his little Mercedes coupe. That was the day I decided to leave LA. Anyway, my nieces and nephews are listening to this story. Maybe they've heard it before. Maybe they've heard it too many times, and the gravy is cold. And they launch into a conversation about Donald Trump or something else. That's what getting old means. You realize. This is like in Russia when they turn off the microphone. You realize, can you hear me? Yeah. You realize that time moves, and that what interests you, Orson Welles, the Merv Griffin show, that night in LA, the softness of that twilight, what interests you about that memory has nothing to do with your nephews and nieces who look like Keanu Reeves. And so you back off. So I've come to say happy birthday to Latino, Latina, Latinx, Hispanic, with the notion, with the agreement that what Latinx is trying to do is to formulate a cultural understanding of what it might mean to live as an American within the Americas, to live culturally as an American within the Americas. The trouble is that there are in Latin America every kind of cultural difference and varieties, from Indians in Bolivia to blonde film stars in Cuba to revolutionaries in Buenos Aires, to the architect who designed this building, by the way, in Montevideo. It's this beautiful building. Can I just say, in London, where I spent about half the year, he has also designed what is easily, and this is hard to imagine, what is easily the ugliest building in the city of London. Look him up. It looks like a paper bag that has been inverted and is sort of has sat in the sun, and I think that's Latinx architecture. It won the Barnacle Prize of the Year in London. Every year we have a Barnacle of the Year because every year there's yet another hideous construction because there's so much money pouring into London from gangster economies around the world that we have to build buildings for them to live in or to do their corrupt banking in. Get me to come here and talk to you about Hong Kong Bank in London and money laundering sometime. Anyway, culture. I guess we don't have any culture yet to describe because it is in process. It is happening around us, to us, within you, because you are part of our culture. And you participate in this creation of the culture of the Hispanic, Latina, Latinx. You get it. We come from so many, but there is in all of us this sense that what matters in me is cultural and not biological. My race is tragic. I can't share it with you. I can't make you me. My culture I can give you. I can make for you. I can cook it for you. I can sing it for you. We can dance it together. I will show you the steps. My culture is absolutely a passable piece. That notion that I am free of sin, free of the ghosts, is very important for me because as a boy, I was terrified of my Mexican relatives. My uncle especially, the one with the green eyes and the cowboy hat, who came up from Juarez, who became a real estate developer in Juarez. To this day, in that godforsaken city of drug lords, there is a building with his name on Oficina Moran in downtown Juarez. That was my uncle. He got me one day, I must have been about 4, 5 years old. He knew I could not speak Spanish. And he twisted my arms where the muscles were not yet formed until I spoke to him in Spanish. Pocho. Ghosts everywhere. Ghosts everywhere. That uncle, I remember, his son would be flying a private plane around Mexico. Ended up in a shootout in a saloon in Mexico. The telephone rings in the house late at night. My mother picks it up. My mother screams. Mexico's on the line. There are good things going on. There are bad things going on. You know this. This is Theology 101. We are a fallen people. We are living post-lapsarian history. Univision now, the Spanish language network, which is owned by corporate interests in Mexico and Miami and New York, has decided that this new generation of Latinos, Latinas, Hispanics, Latinxes will be Spanish speaking, and we are going to hold them to the TV for soccer matches, for telenovelas, these soap operas that look like they were made in Norway with these blonde actors and actors, and everybody looks Norwegian, and my mother used to love them, and she said, see, we're not all pobres, no somos todos pobres. We're also blonde, she said. Lucky us. Mexico is the peroxide capital of the world. The decision is made at Univision that there will be no English used. And the interesting thing is that a lot of English-speaking teenagers who love the soccer matches at Univision over the soccer matches on ESPN were listening to this chatter of Spanish and maybe even learning Spanish by listening to Spanish. But the immigrant kids are listening to the Spanish because it is the only language of their leisured life. For everything. Culture is fluid. Culture is fluid. Culture keeps changing. What the rival network, Telemundo, is now matching Univision in the ratings. In Los Angeles, these are the two largest television outlets, Univision and Telemundo. Telemundo now has soap operas in which some of the kids, imagine this, speak English. They even speak broken English or broken Spanish to their parents. Can you imagine it? Hispanics. Culture is mysterious. These ghosts, how they fled in and out. There is one of my nieces who looks like Audrey Hepburn, who her husband was in Book of Mormon on Broadway. She's in love with Spanish, the language. She speaks it like you run your hand along silk. She has taught in Indian villages in Guatemala, wanders through the hills, unafraid. This Spanish, it comes almost from Sevilla. It's so refined, it's so odd and mysterious. There she is. How did it come to her? Her mother doesn't speak Spanish. There is Tom Schnetz, whose grandfather on the German side fought for the Nazis. And he has two very good Mexican restaurants in the East Bay in the Bay Area. And he's written I think one of the two best Mexican cookbooks. My nephew, with a German surname, who doesn't speak any Spanish, but cooks up a mean mole. Culture moves in and out of our lives, I'm telling you. We are not Canadians. Don't touch that mole unless you're prepared to believe that maybe you're Mexican. There is his son, Ethan. I'm going to have lunch with him on Saturday, because Ethan is now a junior in high school and has no interest in his high school. He's very beautiful, wears scarves, and went to a restaurant the other day and a woman said, gee, you look like the young James Dean. And he didn't know who James Dean was, of course. He wants to go to Barcelona and learn Spanish. I don't know where that idea has come to him, but I want him to go to Paris because the way he dresses, only Paris will understand him. Then there is my other nephew from another family. There was divorce. His mother is Norwegian. She is very angry at her ex-husband, my brother. I'm very angry too. And she says to her son, I don't want you telling everybody that you're Hispanic. So my nephew, of course, tells everybody that he meets that he's Hispanic. And he has so many women chasing after him that I don't even think they care whether he said her Hispanic or... Culture keeps moving. There's Diana Kennedy in Mexico tonight, Michoacan, telling the Indians how to cook. There was a skinhead in San Diego that I interviewed for a German magazine years ago who told me all the reasons why he hates Mexicans. This was before Donald Trump's beautiful wall. He had the idea that we should put piranha fish in the Rio Grande River and let the immigrants be bitten to death. And in those days, the euro hadn't been invented, so I had all these Deutschmarks in my pocket. I said, do you want to go out to lunch and continue this tirade? And he said, yeah, sure, I have the time. I said, where would you like to go? thinking that he was going to eat beef. He said, I'd like to go to a Mexican restaurant. I said, are you crazy? You don't want Mexicans, but you want to go to a Mexican restaurant. Yes, I like burritos. I said, that doesn't make any sense. It's a big fucking deal. I said, it is a big fucking deal. Do you know what's going on inside the burrito? There's an African making love to an Indian to a Spaniard. That's why it's so bad for your heart. Richard Nixon, I salute you for making me a Hispanic. In Whittier, California, when Richard Nixon dreamt of coming to this school, a school that would not accept his papers when he died. Because, oh no, we're Hispanics, we don't do that. The great seer, the great trailblazer to China. Oh no, we don't want that at Duke. We're Latino, Latinx, Hispanics. There is in Whittier, California, the town where Richard Nixon was raised, a burrito stand run by a group of Cambodians. They offer tofu burritos. It is the perfect food. You gain and you lose weight at the same time. I have a bus waiting outside. It's being driven by a Mexican guy who's not legal, so who knows whether we'll get there. But if you want to come with me, it'll take us about 4 days. We can sing Canadian songs as we cross the Great Plains. But I recommend it. Oh, brave new world. Thank you.